All right. Well, I'm so happy to be back on the blog this week, and I'm super excited that I have Roseanna White with me today. Hi, Roseanna.
Hello, everybody.
Hi. So glad to have you on the blog and sharing about your writing and your new book that's coming out, Yesterday's Tides. So I want to make the most of our time. So I'm going to just jump right in and turn it over to you. And what I'd really like for you to do is just start out introducing yourself. For those who may not know you, tell us a little bit about you and your family, if you'd like to, where you live, all that kind of good stuff.
Sure. I'm Roseanna White, author. I design book covers. My husband and I own a publishing group that has 5 different imprints. Homeschool my 2 kids who are somehow in high school. I don't know how this happened. My daughter's a senior. I'm
Wow.
baffled by this. But we live in the mountains of West Virginia, right next to the Maryland border. So one of those places where you can skip a stone and hit 3 states sort of thing. That's where we live. So house in West Virginia, office in Maryland, all that fun stuff.
Okay.
So this is, the publishing world has pretty much been my life since I graduated from college in, some year a while ago. And I've just kind of dived in and learned everything I could about it. And I just love the written word so much. So I attended St. John's College, which is the great book school where you just read great literature for 4 years. And it's like, how do you learn to write good books? You read great books.
Yes.
So
Yes.
that's just kind of been my life, and my philosophy is the written word.
So you've been doing this for a long time and it's a passion of yours.
Yeah.
Is this something that you've wanted to do since childhood, or was there something else in your childhood that you're like, oh, when I grow up, this is what I'm going to do?
Well, okay. So it's kind of funny. I actually remember the first time I sat down and wrote fiction. I was homesick from school. My mom was at work, so I was with my grandmother, and this particular grandparents, they don't have TV. And I was like, what am I supposed to do? And so she's like, here's some paper. And I'm like, I don't want to draw. She's like, write a story. And I was like, write a story? Because I loved playing make-believe, but I had never put it into words before. So I sat down and I wrote my first story about a princess who, for her birthday, received a magical hair bow. I don't remember what it did, but it, saved the world. So I was a goner. Ever since then, writing was how I expressed my emotion. It was how I got all these, weird things in my head out of my head. And so from first grade onward, anytime people asked me what I wanted to be when I grew up, I would always say, I want to write books, and because I didn't think that writing books could actually be something I did for my whole life. So it's and be a teacher, and be an archaeologist, and be a, whatever, fill in the blank. But it was always, and write books. So eventually I said, you know what, all I really want to do is write. So we'll just say, never mind, on all that other stuff. So by the time I was in high school, I had finished a book already. I finished one in middle school. And I just said, all right, this is what I'm going to do. So whoever I marry is just going to have to be okay with supporting me while I do this. And thankfully, I have a wonderful husband who totally agreed with that vision. So yeah, it's always been the dream.
That's great. And your husband works with you with the publishing company?
Yeah, it was actually his idea to start the publishing company way back when we were in college, actually. I think we launched it the year after college. So yeah, that part was his dream. He did have a day job for quite a while we, worked on that, and I worked on my writing and all that good stuff. And now everything is grown to the point where it is able to support us. So he's then, done with that day job and is pursuing his passions, which is not only the publishing industry, but also Christian film. So it's fun, and our lives are very intertwined on every level. So we work together on pretty much everything. It's pretty great.
Really good thing you love each other.
Yeah. And we both worked from home pretty much most of our lives, most of our marriage. So when people say, when their husbands retire, they don't know what to do with each other, I'm like, I don't know what to do if he's not here. It's like we're always in the same space.
I know my husband was in the military for 20 years and he'd go off on 6-month deployments, and then when he was retiring from the military, I thought, what in the world am I going to do with him home all the time? But
Yeah.
thankfully, we love each other and it's worked out well, and we're good. All right, so let's talk a little bit about how you incorporate Christ into your writing and hope into your writing, because you write Christian fiction,
I
but
do.
I know we have to be careful when you hear the phrase, don't be preachy. So how do you go about doing that?
Yeah. So it was probably like a year and a half ago on a vacation. My husband and I were actually talking about what makes something preachy versus not preachy. And he put it in just really great words. So I always steal them now when this comes up. And he said that the difference between a preachy book and a non-preachy book or movie, or an authentic and an inauthentic one, is whether we are asking deep questions or trying to push a canned answer. So things feel authentic if you are authentically exploring them. So that's what I always try to do in my stories is I don't come at it necessarily with an agenda. I come at it with a question that my characters are exploring or are battling with sometimes. And through the lens of that question, I just kind of see where God takes me. So, I do a lot of prayer and study as I'm writing things, but also just a lot of sitting with whatever is the question in a particular book, dwelling with it. And instead of saying, oh, well, I know the answer to that, let's push that into the book. It's more about, how do people actually grapple with this complicated thing called faith? And it's something I always want to explore because faith is a huge part of my life. And I can't imagine living without God walking by my side. And even as I have contemplated over the years, what sorts of books I want to write, there was a while there was like, maybe it'll be easier to write mainstream books. Maybe I should do that. But I couldn't, because for me, the whole point of writing is exploring my faith. I always say that writing is part of my prayer life. So even novel writing, right? Like this is how I turn my heart over to God and how I open my heart up to him. So I need him to be in the story. And there are many people who can do that without making it explicitly a Christian novel. But that's just not the stories God has laid on my heart. So as long as those are the stories God gives me that, have not only the adventure and the suspense and the romance, but the drawing closer to him, those are the stories I'm going to keep writing.
Yeah, and I totally agree with you. And that's the same way I feel about writing is I can't not include God and faith and the character's journey of learning these deep issues, and where is God in the midst of that. Yeah, and I love it, and that's what I love to read too. So, and I'm reading one right now, Yesterday's Tides. I'm privileged to be on your launch team, and so I'm in the midst of reading the book right now and loving it. And so I want us to talk about that a little bit. Tell us what inspired this story. Was there anything personal about it, history, or anything true that happened that you just wanted to write this story?
A little bit of both. So it's set in the Outer Banks of North Carolina, which is a place very near and dear to me and my husband. We actually got married in the Outer Banks because both of our families vacation there every year. So it's just one of those places we go back there every year and love it and consider it a second home. Would love to make it a first home, but can't afford it, sort of thing, So it was actually the summer after we graduated from college that I woke up in the middle of the night with this idea for a book. And it was Louisa and Rem. And it was set in the Outer Banks. And, that was kind of what I knew about it. But it just took me over. And I spent the next 3 days doing nothing but writing. And I wrote half the book in 3 days.
Wow.
And it was at the time a contemporary novel. And it was all about Louisa and Rem. And it was just one of those that, it was obviously never published as a contemporary novel. And every year as I went back to the beach, their story hit me again. And I was like, man, I really need to find a way to tell this story someday. So every time I went down, I'm looking around for where's the inn and where did this happen and where did that happen? And it always stayed very fresh in my heart and in my mind. And as I started writing historical novels, my best friend, who's my critique partner, was like, what you could do is set it in like the 1920s or in World War I. And I was like, oh, yes, I should do that. So as I wrote my Codebreaker series, I planted Remington Culbreth in room 40. in the contemporary, he was in the CIA. So just intelligence in World War I instead. So I've had this planned for a long time, how to rewrite the story as a historical. So I planted him in my historical world and told my publisher, "You gonna let me write a story someday, please?" So I was kind of always trying to think of how to turn their story into a World War I story. And one year, as we were vacationing again in the Outer Banks, I was like, it's a real shame that all the interesting stuff happened down here in World War II instead of in World War I, because I had learned about the sinking of the Bedfordshire, which was an English ship. It was actually a fishing trawler that had been repurposed to be a warship. So fishing ship with guns mounted on it, basically. That it was part of a whole fleet of British ships that were sent to America to defend the East Coast after we had declared war, but before we had mobilized our own shipbuilding and all that stuff. So they played a huge role in protecting the American East Coast, especially in like 1942 to 43. And so one of these ships was torpedoed and sank, and several of the bodies of the sailors actually washed ashore on Ocracoke Island, which is in the Outer Banks. There were 7 bodies recovered, and I believe 50 couple that had been on the ship. And so the locals had a burial for them, and it is now in what is called the British Cemetery, which is still remembered and kept up very nicely. And so every year on that date, which is May 11th, they have a memorial for the British sailors who gave their life protecting America in World War II. So that's actually where this book starts. So it kind of combines a World War II line with my original World War I line, my original characters, with these other characters I had also developed over the years, and tells it in a time slip fashion. So I got to tell all the stories I wanted to tell in one of my favorite places on earth. It's great.
Yeah. So is this your first split time novel that you've written?
Well, my first full one, I've written a couple guidepost mysteries that had both a contemporary line and a very shortened historical line. So it was one of those, like, there were about 20 chapters and 5 of them were historical. So it was not balanced. This one is very balanced, but my first like big full one. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's fun. I love reading split time books because you get so much depth in the story. And I love how they cross over and connect together.
Yep.
So tell us a little bit about the premise of the Yesterday's Tides.
All right. Well, the overall kind of theme is that what we consider history has such a huge impact on where we are today. So in this particular way, I wanted to explore a bit how World War II, which we know so well because it was, more recent history, very well recorded, everything in it was an echo of World War I, which I learned as I was writing World War I books. Everything I learned was like, oh, I thought that was just from World War II. No, it had its roots in World War I. And in pretty much every way, the Second World War was an answer to the First World War because it left so many things unresolved and so many issues still on the table and so many bitternesses that were still gripping people. So I wanted to kind of explore that through the lens of a family. So I have the Ocracoke Inn, which is a fictional inn, but it's based on a real, used to be an inn in Ocracoke. It's actually now a rental house. You can rent it for the week. And it's called the Soundfront Inn. And so I have a family that's actually got some mixed race origins, which in the South in the early 20th century was its own can of worms, of course. And then I have an Englishman for a hero who comes over and basically falls in love with an innkeeper's daughter who is all wrong for him. And there are just some repercussions from all the things that they encounter that follow through into the next generation. So my World War II line opens with Evie Farrow, who is my innkeeper in the World War II line. And we don't really know much about how the lines intersect at first. We just know she is the innkeeper of the Ocracoke Inn and that she has been here. She describes it as yesterday is the same as today, and it's going to be the same as tomorrow because that's life on a tiny little island. But then the world kind of explodes on her when the ship sinks, and she actually rescues one of the people from the ship who is not dead. He is an intelligence officer. So that was, of course, made up. But the idea being he is tracking down a German spy. And this is also based on history from that era. In World War II, when, you know, there were U-boats patrolling the coast here, there were always rumors that there were Germans in the woods. And so the Outer Banks has a lot of wooded areas, or did at the time anyway. And so especially the older ladies would be like, don't you go outside after dark, there's Germans in the woods. And of course it's like, that's total paranoia. There's no evidence of this. But me with my writer brain said, what if there were Germans in the woods? So I combined it all together.
Yeah, it sounds good. Let's see that cover again. You flashed it for a second. So I have to say, the first time I laid eyes on that cover, I'm like, I want to read the book just based on the cover. It's so beautiful. I love it.
They did a fabulous job. Yeah, the first time they showed it to me, I was like, I'm in love. I'm just going to stare at this for the rest of the day.
I know. It's one of the best covers I've ever seen. And like, I've seen a lot of covers. So
thank you. And I totally agree. They hit it out of the ballpark with this one.
And I love that your story is set in the Outer Banks, because living in Southeast Virginia, I'm only about an hour from the Outer Banks, and in fact, I'm going there the end of this month for our ACFW Virginia Board Planning Retreat. So it's, you know, it's familiar to me. So I enjoy reading books like that too, that are set in places that I know, that I have visited.
Agreed. That's always nice.
Yeah. So what are you hoping that readers are going to take away from this book? Like when they close it and it's the end, that they're going to say, this is what I got from this.
I hope that one of the biggest takeaways is that everything we do matters. We might think that we're making decisions just, you know, on the fly or in the moment or just for us, but everything we do impacts the people around us. It impacts our kids. It impacts the next generation. And we don't know how far out those ripples go. So I just kind of wanted to bring home that, you know, what we would consider the tides of today have a huge effect on tomorrow. And everything we do is important.
That's good. So do you have a favorite quote from the book? Something you pull out of your hat?
There are some that are like, you know, more in depth and stuff, but really one of my favorite lines, Rem, my Englishman, is having a conversation with Gran, who is the African-American kind of housekeeper type person of the inn and grandmother of everybody. And he says that he's the odd duck in his family, and her reply is, the odd ducks make the biggest splash. And it was just like, I just loved that. I don't know why. It was just fun. But, you know, when we think we're not fitting in and, you know, we can feel so awkward, but it's generally not the people like everyone else who make a big impact in history. It's the people who are different. So embrace your differences and your oddities, knowing that God gave them to you to do something.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. So obviously writing historicals, you have to do a lot of research. So what does that look like for you? How do you tackle that?
Usually it looks like a lot of internet articles and books and YouTube videos. With this one, because it's the Outer Banks and I can get there, it involved a research trip. So we booked a place on Ocracoke for the week of the memorial service. It was during COVID, the service was canceled, but still we were there. We were there at the right time. So we just took a week and we walked. This is a very small island. You can walk the entire village, you know, multiple times. So we walked all through the village. We learned all the streets. We took photos of everything, and I could identify, this is where this house is, and this is where the inn is, and this is how long it takes to walk from here to here, and all that fun stuff, and just get a real sense of the local flavor. Listen to the local drawl. You know, I had an appointment at the Historical Preservation Society, and they let me into their archives, so I could go through all of the books that they had that are out of print and just the local stuff. And I just took photos of like every page that I wanted, because I didn't have time to read it all then.
Yeah.
And, you know, I brought home some of the Yopun tea that they have that's made from the leaves of a tree that grows locally and is the only caffeinated plant indigenous to North America. Who knew? And so, you know, that sort of thing. I you know, bought a little DVD about the Ocracoke brogue, the Ocracoke brogue it's called. And yeah, just like being there was so cool. And especially because they want to preserve their history. So they have a lot of fun things like, little guidebooks and little history books that they put together that aren't published. So they're not available on Amazon, but they were so helpful because it's just essays from the locals and remembering things and, the stories about, brush the mosquitoes off when you come in, they'll hide in the folds of your clothes and, just all the kind of local wisdom.
Yeah.
So being able to do that was just
fun.
amazing. And I, it's a place I've been multiple times before, and I'm in the Outer Banks every year, but just a dedicated trip just to absorb it was great.
Yeah.
And to talk to the locals and all that.
That's fun.
So fun.
So I could literally talk to you all day long about your writing and about books in general and Yesterday's Tides and all of that. But gosh, time flies by. And I've really enjoyed hearing about Yesterday's Tides. And I know that everyone who watches this is going to love it too. But before we wrap up, just kind of lastly, I'd like for you to talk a little bit about where people can connect with you on social media or your website or whatever, and then tell us what to look for next from you.
All right, so you can find me at roseannamwhite.com. Sign up for my newsletter. There's signups right on the front page and pretty much everywhere else. And that's how I contact people most regularly. I send out a newsletter every week that has a roundup of all the stuff I'm doing. So you can see all my blog posts, all my social media stuff, any giveaways going on, sales in the shop, that sort of thing. I do have a shop on the book or on the website where you can get signed books and bookish merchandise.
Which is
you can
so
find
cool,
me on,
by the way. I love that you have your own shop. That's really cool.
Yep. So you can find me on social media at Roseanna M. White. Same handle on everything. I'm most active on Facebook and Instagram, but I'm pretty much everywhere. Not the really new ones. I don't know what to do with TikTok yet. Just for a heads up there. But yes, you can find me online, all those places. There's contact forms if you want to email me and all that good stuff. And so coming next, let's see, where are we in my schedule? So this summer begins my next series, which is The Imposters. It's set in Edwardian England and follows an aristocratic brother and sister who, when faced with near bankruptcy from their father's frivolities, have to make a living. So they become private investigators, but nobody knows they're private investigators, which allows them to spy on the elite in order to get, answers for the elite most of the time. So they're spying on their own. And there are some circus themes and, kind of hijinks because their friends are the theater groups and the acrobats and the circus performers on which their father spent all their money. So we kind of use that as how they're solving all of these mysteries. So very fun.
That sounds fun. I can't wait for that. Also, I know you are offering a giveaway of Yesterday's Tides to one person that comments on this interview. And I'll be posting about that when this goes live. And I think, let's see, your book releases the 24th. Is that right?
Yep.
And I think this interview is going to post on the 25th. So I think your book will be out one day. So it'll be hot off the presses, guys. So make sure you're commenting on this so you can get in that drawing for the book. So thanks so much again for joining me, Roseanna, and sharing your time, because I know you have a lot going on. So I know your time is precious. But I appreciate it and love chatting with you and hearing about your writing. And I'll be looking for you online and following you and what's coming up next.
All right. Thanks so much for having me. It's always so much fun to do these and to talk to you. And a big hello to everyone watching.
All right. Talk to you later.
Bye.
Bye.